over at BangTheBook.com, we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Lots of great stuff going on over there from our talented cast of writers. The reason I start with that today is because Danny Vorgs has posted his Week 1 power ratings from his NFL model, his projected final scores for every game. He's got some side plays. He's got some totals plays. He's got some recommended teasers. All kinds of great stuff over there from Danny at BangTheBook.com. 58% on sides and totals over the last couple of years in that article. He's looking to get off to a good start here this week. Also over there, my college football power ratings. We got situational betting tips for Week 2. We'll have a UFC preview coming up here later today. NASCAR previews, soccer previews, WNBA previews. All kinds of great stuff going on over there at the website. As far as today's show goes, we'll start things off with Brad Powers, professional handicapper at BradPowerSports.com. Going to see if we're in mid-season form here, trying to get through a lot of your listener requests for Week 2 here of the college football season. If we have any time, we'll check on the NFL with him as well. Then the second half of today's show, which I recorded yesterday on Skype, so the two segments will sound different here today, but I chatted with Fabian Sommer, a.k.a. Suma810 on Twitter. We talked about Week 1 in the NFL. We talked about general NFL betting tips, market entry, all kinds of very important stuff to go along with 4 game breakdowns for Week 1 here with Fabian. Speaking of the NFL, still time to sign up for the Circa Million and the Westgate Super Contest out there in Las Vegas. Time is running out, though. The deadline coming up here on Saturday morning. Vegas, Maddie, and Tony over at footballcontest.com, our preferred proxy service for all of those contests. They've been great for us. I have no doubt that they'll be great for you as well. All right, we got one guest here on the recording, one guest coming up in the second half of today's show, which I'll just plug in during the editing process. That is professional handicapper Brad Powers from BradPowerSports.com. Brad, how's it going today, man?
Man, it's going well. How you doing on this fine Thursday?
Doing well, buddy. Appreciate your time as always, man. Thank you so much for joining me. And we're going to tackle a lot of games here on today's show. I got a lot of listener requests. I figure it's best to do this with you since you have write-ups of every game in your Powers Picks newsletter anyway. But before we get into these specific games, Week 1 to Week 2, any big-time adjustments that you made in your power ratings or in your mindset?
Well, I mean, I made a few. It's kind of a tough week. On one hand, you don't want to, over-adjust. You want to maybe trust what you had as far as leading up to the season, as far as preseason observations. But on the other, you want to be aggressive with your power rating if you're just dead wrong about a team. So Week 2, it's very intriguing because a lot of times you get clear overreactions. It's certainly the overreaction week. But, I mean, obviously teams that were majorly upgraded by me or Tulane, I thought that was one of the better performances, a blowout win over an FIU team that a lot of people were high on. Georgia State, obviously, that's the obvious one. Boise State with Hank Bachmeier running the show down there. When you got a true freshman quarterback, you're down 18 in the heat and humidity of the South. You clearly got an upgrade. The Broncos, on the other side, I mean, Tennessee's, you got to put them down. The couple of quarterback injuries, SC, South Carolina, they're down. Nebraska was very, very pathetic. I mean, considering that they had 3 non-offensive touchdowns and still only beat South Alabama by 14, I think you got to downgrade the Huskers. But, yeah, those are quite a few of the downgrades that I had. I haven't moved anybody a touchdown yet, but those are all in the 3-4 point type of adjustments that I've made so far.
All right, couple quick things here. JT Daniels, Jake Bentley. How much of an adjustment are those two quarterbacks worth to their respective teams' power rating?
It's a good question. JT Daniels, I think it's worth about 3.5, 4 points. I think that's where the market pretty much has it. Nothing significant there. Jake Bentley, I downgraded him. Kind of similar, that even though I'm not a huge Jake Bentley fan. I mean, he's got the experience. I mean, when you got a guy that started 30 games, but, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there hasn't been, for a guy that started 30 games, and I know you follow the South Carolina program even closer than I do, there just hasn't been a progression there as far as consistent improvement. I mean, he pretty much is what he is at this point. So, on one hand, it's about the quality of your starter, but it's also about the quality of your backup. So 2 young guys are going to replace him. both guys in between that 3 to 4 point range, in my opinion.
Well, and this is a conversation for another day, but I know Muschamp's on the hot seat there in Columbia, and deservedly so. But, I mean, Bentley doesn't have a good offensive coordinator, doesn't really have a great quarterbacks coach. His dad is the running backs coach. So, this offense just really hasn't progressed all that much for South Carolina. They should be better defensively, and it's, again, a discussion for another day. But that's important. If you've got a multi-year starter, you want to see that upward trajectory. For Bentley, it feels like he just kind of got a little bit better and then plateaued. And that's probably something worth looking at a little bit more here this season with, quarterbacks, coaches, and offensive coordinators in general.
Yeah, I mean, because, on one hand, a lot of the guys, as far as the preseason hype are going, I was tweeting this out. It's something that it's just 1 year sample size, but I'm going to have to really start diving into the next couple of years because I have not started off week one very good at all now each of the last 2 years. And I'm wondering if the market's valuing some of those guys that are very experienced. Jake Bentley on paper, looks good. You got a 3 year starting guy started 3 years and he's going to be a senior quarterback. I think the market says, hey, thumbs up for that. But I think as the season progresses, you're exactly right. You got to kind of look at the guys that are kind of plateauing because the market doesn't necessarily take that into consideration.
And one more thing to touch on here before we get to this laundry list of games that we've got. I know you were on some of these sides where teams just had very lopsided turnover margins. They were -3, -4, something like that. Again, from week 1 to week 2, box score study, really from 1 week to the next, no matter what time of the year it is, box score study just so critical.
Oh, no question about it. Now, it's not parity like the NFL where I think it's more valuable to study really the box score because the teams are close and just a couple of plays can be a significant difference. But when you only got one data point, if that data point can be relatively misleading, I think you can find some value, especially in week 2. Purdue team -5 in turnovers pretty much had the game won, even though they might not have covered. If you flipped on that game with a couple minutes left in the fourth quarter, you thought Purdue was going to win that game. A little bit misleading there. I would say maybe the biggest one for me might have been Missouri if you weren't paying attention. Now, I get it. You got to downgrade Missouri. They just lost outright as a 17.5-point favorite. But I'll give you one play at the end of the first half that really skewed that entire game. So Missouri's at the Wyoming 1-yard line on the final play of the first half. They're going in to score. Missouri fumbles on that play. Wyoming picks it up, returns it 79 yards. Kelly Bryant tackles the guy. It's going to be the final play of the half, even though Missouri just basically gave up a touchdown. But Kelly Bryant horse collars the guy, which the half can't end on a penalty. So Wyoming ends up lining up for a field goal and get it. So a 10-point play on the final play of the first half with all the momentum going to Wyoming there. That's the type of stuff you're looking at if you're looking for a misleading final.
All right, so here we go. We're going to try and get through as many of these games as we possibly can. In the interest of time, we may move some of them just to a Pick 6 segment, which is our 6 games in very rapid-fire fashion. But we start bright and early here on Saturday. Going to be an 8 a.m. kickoff for you out there in Las Vegas, 11 a.m. Eastern time, obviously. Ohio and Pitt. Pitt down to a 5-point favorite here after opening 6.5.
Let me ask you, though, quick. Do you get the ACC network?
I don't know. I haven't even looked for it.
I don't get it. So, I'd like to watch a few of these games, but, the shame, you got a new network and no provider. But, looking at this, I tell you, the line's begging you to take Pittsburgh. And I'll say this. If you talk about a little bit misleading final, Pittsburgh wasn't as bad as that 30-14 final last week showed. They actually led Virginia at halftime 14-13. Kenny Pickett, we talked about quarterbacks, they got to make some progressions or lack thereof. Kenny Pickett, lack thereof. Threw a couple of costly interceptions last week, and they're going to be relying on him more this season after they lost a pair of 1,000-yard rushers. And he was basically on the run the whole game. He's got 4 first-year starters on the offensive line. Ohio's dangerous, but Ohio, like you have, told me time after time, one-player team with Nathan Rourke, and they pretty much go as he goes. It's going to be, in my opinion, a very square pick here, but I'm going to lean Pittsburgh. I mean, they cannot start 0-2, especially with Penn State on deck. They'd be looking at an 0-3 start. I think they're somewhat motivated to atone for last week. I would lean with the Panthers here. My number's closer to a full touchdown.
Yeah, my number is even a little bit higher than that. So from a power rating standpoint, definitely would have to look at Pitt now, especially with this one going down to 5. But, that's something, too. I mean, we have seen some line moves here this week against teams whose offensive lines just did not play well in week 1. So, yeah, it's important to go through the box score study, but obviously you want to watch as many games as you possibly can. There were some teams that got mauled at the point of attack, and those teams are being bet against this week. So that's kind of something else I noticed in the marketplace.
That's a good point. And I'll tell you, when there's all the FCS games, I mean, I think there was 83 games last week. And especially important this time of year, you want to learn as much as you can because, I mean, even the coaches, and I've said this time and time again, I don't think that they're I'll take, for instance, Brian Kelly, after when he was talking about his young players, on a night game, in an atmosphere, a road game, he doesn't fully know how they're going to react to those types of environments until you actually play a game. Similar when you're handicapping these teams. I mean, sometimes, especially early in the season, you got to see the eye test for yourself. The box score can only get you so much.
Well, and we talked about this on yesterday's show, actually, regarding the Pac-12, who, obviously didn't look good in Week 0 or Week 1. Wasn't exactly a banner week for the ACC either. I mean, you had Virginia Tech, who was thought to be, a pretty good team there in that Coastal Division. I mean, they fell on the wrong side of the turnover margin, but they still lost to Boston College after getting steamed through the key numbers of 3 and 4. Florida State's collapse that we all know about. So this just may be some anti-ACC sentiment as well. We've seen that with the Pac-12 this week in the market. We may see it here with the ACC also. In another game that we're going to talk about here in a couple of minutes with Syracuse and Maryland with a flip favorite scenario there. So I think that's part of it too, is that this game just gets lumped into that group of, well, the ACC sucks. Well, maybe it does, but also this is Pitt against a MAC team. And last week they played, the team that some people think is going to win the Coastal in Virginia.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's a good point, although I'm pretty high on Ohio. But I will say this. I thought Pittsburgh was kind of a fake team a year ago. They won the Coastal, but they were outscored and outgained on the season. So I think Pittsburgh, we got to keep expectations relatively, I wouldn't say short here, but in mind that they were, even though they got to a conference championship game, that was an average football team at best a year ago. And I'll be honest with you, Pat Narduzzi hasn't, in my opinion, I don't think we're deeming his era so far in Pittsburgh outside of a couple of really big, shocking outright upsets. I mean, his era so far, in my opinion, kind of been a little bit of a disappointment.
All right, so we move away from that game here. We go to the Big Ten game, 3:15, 3:16, Rutgers and Iowa. These conference games in Week 1 and Week 2 are always interesting to me, especially when teams go outside the conference the following week, which we can touch on here in a few games later on. But how do you see this one here with Iowa laying almost 3 touchdowns?
Yeah, I mean, Rutgers getting a lot of respect in the marketplace. I mean, I was all over Rutgers, and one of my few winners last week was Rutgers, although, I mean, I was freaking out when it was 21-7 at the end of the first quarter, but obviously Rutgers looked the part in the final 3 quarters, outscoring UMass 41-0. Iowa, in my opinion, got an relatively easy, not easy, but, the final was easier than what the reality was against Miami, Ohio last week, where they got the front door cover, got a couple of touchdowns late in the final 6 minutes. So it's slight downgrade on Iowa, who I was kind of higher on than the marketplace. So I actually have 2 teams that I'm higher on than the market, although my number's a little bit higher than what the spread is here. And I think a lot of people, and maybe even the market, is afraid to lay a big number with Iowa. Iowa's kind of surprising to me that they're pretty profitable as a favorite. 15-4 and a couple of pushes there. So 15-4-2 against the spread last 3 years in the favorite role. I'm not going to bet the game, but if you're going to ask me where I'm leaning here, clearly my number says Iowa's the play.
Yeah, I got this one more up in the 24 range. So maybe I didn't give Rutgers enough respect for last week, or maybe I'm just a little bit too high on Iowa. That's certainly a possibility. But, like you said, I mean, I don't think I'm going to lay the price here. I'm certainly not going to take Rutgers. So game that I definitely don't have too much interest in, but I know we had some listener requests to talk about this one. All right, how about game 317, 318? One spot down on the board. This one, maybe a little bit of a head scratcher to some. I think the magnitude of this line move is pretty interesting here. Syracuse and Maryland. This one actually opened at BetOnline, Syracuse -3. I could be wrong. I think the Circa opened higher than that, and now Maryland's a 2-point favorite.
Yeah, I disagree with it, although, I mean, I'm not going to reveal the identities. This was a betting syndicate that took, did this one. I mean, I'm familiar with a couple guys that are part of it. So I just, they let me know that it was going to happen. I told them, I don't know about that one. But I guess the expectation is, Maryland, the last couple of seasons, whether it be quarterback injuries, whether it be distractions off the field of the player dying, and then obviously an interim coach, that the true strength of Maryland, if you've been following recruiting classes, DJ Durkin did do a really good job, is Maryland's been better than their records indicated the last couple of years. So that's what the market's seeing a little bit there, that they think they're undervalued. I have my doubts. I'm not a big Mike Locksley fan. That he's the new Maryland coach. I mean, his era at New Mexico was about as bad as it gets. Tommy DeVito on the other side, Syracuse quarterback, was abysmal last week. But that's Syracuse defense. I mean, you think Dino Babers, you think offense. It's actually the Orange defense that was impressive last week, shutting out a decent offense for Liberty. I mean, they got after the quarterback 8 times, 8 sacks for Syracuse in that game. Yeah, my number says Syracuse should be the favorite. I was closer to the opener. I got Syracuse by 2 here. I lean on the Orange, but I'm going to respect that syndicate since I'm familiar with a couple of guys that bet into it. I just disagree with them in this instance.
Yeah, I had Syracuse -3. I went ahead and played the +2.5. I just had to. I mean, if I'm wrong on this game, so be it. But I had to go ahead and take Syracuse here. And you mentioned Tommy DeVito. I think there's some overreaction to just how badly he played last week. But I think that's a guy that can improve. I think Dino Babers is a phenomenal head coach. I think Syracuse does look a little bit better here this week in a lot of respects, especially on offense. As you mentioned, the defense played quite well last week. I think the offense can be better here. And also, look, Maryland rolled up on Howard. I mean, that's cool. That's all well and good. I know Maryland has had some impressive Week 1 performances. They beat Texas back-to-back years, but this is a much, much different animal. So I think Syracuse is just getting severely disrespected out there in the marketplace. How about we move down to game 323, 324 here? Dino Babers' former job, Bowling Green, getting 23.5 or 24 for a trip to Manhattan for a noon kickoff here against Kansas State.
Yeah, the number's about right, in my opinion. I had it closer to 24. I need to see a little bit more Kansas State. I didn't get to watch any highlights from their game other than going through the box score. I will say what I saw from Bowling Green, I was impressed. I know Morgan State is not a good FCS school, but, I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, Bowling Green, 37 first downs, only allowed 4. I mean, they racked up a 550-yard advantage over Morgan State. Darius Wade, the new quarterback, he's the former Boston College quarterback. He looked the part. I came away impressed with the Falcons after Week 1 against Morgan State. So I upgraded them in Kansas State, the slight upgrade, the fact that they won and covered over a decent FCS school. Now, this is one early in the season where I'm not going to get too involved pre-flop, but it will be one that I'm paying attention to, maybe even in-game. But the number looks about right to me, Adam.
Well, and I think this is one, too. I mean, you think about just how putrid Bowling Green was last year and really the year before that, too. I mean, this is a program that has fallen off dramatically. I mean, yeah, 23.5, 24 is a big number, but it's not 27 or 28 where I probably would have thought this game would come out, if I was looking ahead to, Week 2 back in July or something like that. So I do think Bowling Green is getting a little bit of respect off that performance, and, we'll see if they're able to follow up with it. Game 327, 328 here. South Florida and Georgia Tech. I will be perfectly honest and upfront and say that my line on this game is more like Georgia Tech -1.5, and I'm not playing it because I have no idea what the hell either one of these two teams are.
Yeah, I mean, I have Georgia Tech 7. And man, you could have gotten. And I looked at this line. I just had so much money tied up, and I think a Jersey book had South Florida favored by like 5 or 6, and it was sitting there. And I'm like, man, I already have so many Game of the Year bets, and I just don't know what to expect from Georgia Tech. How bad they're going to be in Jeff Collins' first season. So that was a miss there. The fact that after just 1 week. They're laying nearly a touchdown. You could have gotten ahead of a line move of 10-plus points already. I mean, no, I'll say this. I mean, Georgia Tech's blowout loss last week obviously was a lot more excusable considering they're at Clemson and they could have easily covered that game. South Florida, I mean, at this point, does Charlie Strong make it to year 4? I mean, after losing 6 straight to finish last season, they lose by 49. That's the worst performance in the 23 history of the program since they started football. Blake Barnett looked like crap. I'm not going to get involved because even though my number 7 saying lean Georgia Tech here, another popcorn game where I'll just learn more about either team. But I don't want to take it certainly on the South Florida side.
Well, and obviously that's what I'm going to have to do. Having this number way off from the market, it's one of the few games where I'm way off from the market. And I mean, I'm not going to play this game, but I mean, I don't know how I'm supposed to rate these two teams. I know South Florida's bad. I thought I was low on them coming into the season. Apparently not low enough, given the fact that I'm off on this line by so much. But that's one of the important things here is that, once again, we've talked about this before. Your power ratings are a guide. It doesn't mean you have to treat them as gospel. I don't care what my number was on this game relative to the market. I wasn't going to play it because I don't know how to accurately rate Georgia Tech. I was close. I was right on the number last week against Clemson. So obviously South Florida is the team that I have wrong, but I thought I was low enough on them already because, I wound up with a little bit of line value in that game against Wisconsin. So, this is one of those just learn, wait, and watch kind of games. And, I probably will make a pretty substantial South Florida adjustment, win or lose here this week because I'm so far off from the market.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I put so much time into my power ratings, but at this time of year, if it's any other week, when we're talking later in the season, week 7, week 8, week 9, and I got, a game that in my power ratings that's off 3-4 points. I mean, that's almost an auto bet for me. But this time of year, we're still learning. The market's still learning. The coaches are still learning what they have on these teams. I'm a little bit cautious just blindly betting some of my disparities, and there's usually a lot more disparities this time of year than what there is at the end of the season.
All right, so we moved down one spot here, a game only a mother could love, Tulsa and San Jose State. Tulsa, 6.5-point favorite here. We've seen a little bit of movement, 6.5, 7 on this game, but I don't know. It's a tough one, I think.
Yeah, I got Tulsa 7, and I love doing this segment that I get asked this one. San Jose State, give them credit. They got steamed pretty big. Oh, that line was just off. That got steamed closer to my power ratings last week against Northern Colorado. The line moved from 10.5 to 17.5. I had it closer to 17.5 on San Jose State. Give them credit. They took care of business, and that hasn't been the case the last couple of years. I don't know how in the hell Tulsa, covered a game when they had minus 73 yards rushing and only 80 total yards of offense, but kudos to that Michigan State offense for being able to pull that off. I really don't have a good bet here. If anything, I'd probably lean more over. I think Tulsa obviously taking a substantial drop as far as quality of Michigan defense, going from Michigan State's defense to San Jose State's defense. I think their offense will look a hell of a lot better this week. If anything, I'd lean over here.
Yeah, my number's 8.5 here, but I'm still not going to play it because I'm not really sure what either one of these two teams are at this point in time. And, look, I got to say, not to go off on a tangent here, we're not going to touch on this game. We did talk about it on Wednesday with Brian Leonard. Man, Sparty, just that was a dud. Obviously the defense played, fine, but offensively, that was a dud. That was pretty inexcusable against Tulsa.
Yeah, you get a safety from your defense. You get a fumble in the end zone recovered for a touchdown by your defense. You should cover a game. Michigan State's offense scored 3 field goals off a combined 0 yards of offense. 0 yards, 3 field goals. here's the Michigan State team that won their opening game by 3 touchdowns in a game they were laying, 22.5, 23 points, and I downgraded them several points. I mean, that's how bad that offensive performance was. I was extremely disappointed with Michigan State.
All right, let's go to game 331, 332 here in Nebraska and Colorado. This is the most interesting game of the week because this thing has been all over the place. Nebraska's 4.5 out there in the market. It's kind of interesting. You've got some 4s at Bookmaker. You got a 4 at Matchbook, but then you have a 4.5 at Pinnacle and Bovada, which that's kind of strange to me the way this number's moved around. Can you make sense of this game?
I like Nebraska. I bought them low when it went down to 3.5. I got a decent ticket on them that I bet yesterday, and I just pulled behind the curtain. I mean, Nebraska's my top play in the newsletter this week. So here's what I see. Obviously, both teams had misleading wins in week 1. But the reality is if you bet Nebraska, you didn't cash your ticket. If you bet Colorado, you did. So maybe you're still feeling a little bit positivity around the Buffaloes. I don't know that you should. They were +4 in turnovers last week, gave up more than 500 yards to Colorado State. And look, I just liked what I heard from Scott Frost in the post game. If you're watching that game, Nebraska, South Alabama last week, I mean, Frost just laid it on the line. Just basically said that's an anemic as an offensive effort as I've been a part of in a long time. He frankly said that's not the offense he's seen in all fall camp. Martinez, the quarterback, was very disappointed. I'll trust Scott Frost in Nebraska to have a bounce-back effort. And maybe they were looking ahead to this one. Keep in mind, this is a rivalry game from back in the Big 8, Big 12 days. It was a game last year that Nebraska dominated the box score against Colorado, but turnovers and penalties. It was the first game of the season for the Huskers, the debut of Scott Frost. They lost in the final minute. And I think another mispricing here, and I think a lot of handicappers are going to flip on the TV and see, and this is where I rely on my college football fandomness from the 90s and stuff. I remember watching these Nebraska-Colorado games, and when you flip on the TV on Saturday afternoon, half the crowd's going to be in red. And I don't think that's getting properly priced in the marketplace. So add it all up for me. I'm on Nebraska. I think it's a cheap number. I got this one closer to 7. And I downgraded Nebraska like 3 points. I upgraded Colorado, even though I thought they had a misleading final. I did those severe adjustments from last week, and I still think this line should be 7. So I like Nebraska.
Yeah, this is when I had this line 8, and then I saw where it came out, and I saw where it moved. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I should adjust these two teams a little bit. Wound up adjusting the number down to 6. And like you, I played Nebraska at 3.5. I think they're the side this week. Look, that was week 1 for them last year, and they had 565 yards against Colorado. Colorado State just had over 5 bills on Colorado. I think Nebraska does everything they want offensively in this game. I don't know if Colorado can keep pace. I like this one too, and I'm happy to hear that you're along the same lines as me there for this one. How about the next game here? Game 333, 334. Clemson is a 17.5-point favorite, and judging by how Florida State looked last week, judging by what's going on with South Carolina, this will be the smallest number of the year that Clemson has asked to cover, and it's against the top 15 team. I mean, this is sick.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of went – sometimes I go against my power rating. So, I mean, I got Clemson like 18.5, 19 here, but I went ahead and went with A&M. Maybe I didn't upgrade the Aggies enough, but here's two teams that if you just look at final scores last week, you thought, pretty much these two teams played up to expectations. Clemson barely covered, depend on the line you got in the Texas A&M game. But A&M, I thought, was more dominating than the final indicated. Well, I think they threw an interception in the end zone. Texas State scored in the final seconds to prevent the shutout. Clemson, meanwhile, stopped Georgia Tech at the 1-yard line and actually scored last, Clemson did. So I think that might be a little bit of mispricing. And I think some of, Clemson could just roll out and just beat teams. The game's over before the game's even played with Clemson. I don't think that's going to be the case with Texas A&M. I mean, last year they lost by 2 to Clemson. They outgained the Tigers by nearly 100 yards in that game. Jimbo Fisher's not going to be scared. He's quite familiar with Death Valley after coaching, Florida State for 8 years. Looking at it, I'm a little. Trevor Lawrence looked like he was pressing a little bit, and I wonder after an entire offseason of being called a generational talent at quarterback, I wonder if he might struggle a little bit. And by struggle, I mean his struggles are still going to be minute compared to anybody else. But 17.5 is a really big number with a very talented team with a good quarterback in Kellen Mond and I think a good head coach in Jimbo Fisher. I did bet Texas A&M here.
My number is 16, so I guess I could make a case for taking A&M plus the 17.5. I haven't adjusted it since where it was over the summertime. When you look at this game, though, something that I imagine some people are talking about, I don't think it's getting enough run. Think of all the NFL talent Clemson lost off of that defensive line last year. And I know they're still very, very good, but this is only week 2. If this was a 17.5-point number in week 5 or week 6, when I feel like Clemson was at its best, I'd be all about it. I think that would be perfectly fair. I think it would be perfectly reasonable. Here, I agree with you. Maybe Texas A&M is the side here. By no means do I think the Aggies go into Death Valley and win, but keep it close? Sure, why the hell not? So I haven't decided if I'm going to play this one yet, but I think there's a chance that I do wind up on the A&M side.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, obviously Clemson was rolling at the end of last season. Here's a program that's now won 11 consecutive games by 20 points or more. And now they're only laying 17.5. But I think if you're going to get Clemson, you're going to have to get them early in the season, like a Syracuse almost did last year, like the Orange did a couple of years ago, and like Texas A&M almost got Clemson last year. I get it that Clemson at that point was still playing Kelly Bryant, but I would much rather play Clemson early in the season than what I'm almost shudder to think what they'll be at the end of the season. That's another good reason why I went ahead and bet Texas A&M here.
And I don't think that this is a look-ahead spot. I don't think you can consider it that when Clemson had to scratch tooth and nail last year against A&M. And this is a top 15 team coming to town, but they do have Syracuse next week, and Syracuse bothers them year in and year out. So if Clemson's up big in the fourth quarter, maybe you do see them squat on that lead. Maybe A&M gets in the back door. Maybe Lawrence, doesn't get to put up a whole lot of numbers in the second half. A lot of those considerations here at this time of the year, especially when you talk about non-conference games and going into conference play or vice versa. So I'm going to skip ahead down the card a little bit here. I'm going to go back to some of these games in the Pick 6 segment for some quicker analysis, just because we're running a little bit short on time here, and I do want to get to the NFL a little bit. This BYU and Tennessee game is fascinating. Game 357, 358. Tennessee as high as a 4.5-point favorite now at Pinnacle. So we're starting to see some sharp activity on the Volunteers.
Yeah, and I bet this game in the summer. So bear with me here, because I thought I had a really good play. And I think this line tells you that I had a really good pick in the summer. We'll see how it works out, probably. The way week 1 went for me, we'll see. But I bet Tennessee -3 in the summer. And think about that. The line's 4.5 now on Tennessee, and that's a Tennessee team that probably got downgraded more than any team in the marketplace after losing outright as a 25-point favorite last week. So I thought that line should have been like 8. It's a tough handicap, though, even though I got that ticket on Tennessee. You look at it, and here's an interesting thing that I went ahead and researched. So my thought process was, how do teams fare after losing as such a big favorite? So teams that lose outright as a 24-point or more favorite in their next game, how would you think they do, Adam?
I would imagine they do pretty well.
That's what I thought, too. I thought, the market's going to throw them in the trash. That they'll refocus, and everything will be gravy. I was expecting 55%, 57% against the spread. It's opposite that. This is stunning to me. In their next game, teams, after losing outright as a big favorite, 35, 46, and 2, 43% against the spread. That's going back to 1980. So to me, that says maybe they're feeling sorry about themselves. There's a hangover effect after blowing a game that you should have won. So that kind of had me a little bit off the Tennessee bandwagon here. BYU's been good as a road underdog, although you can make the case that they had a more important game last week, and they have more important games coming up, hosting a couple of Pac-12 teams like USC and Washington. But no pick for me here. My number's 4. That's right around where the line is, even though Tennessee's getting bet up. I'll just stand pat with my -3 ticket.
Where did you have this line over the summer?
I think like 8.5, 9. So, and it was week 2, so I was like really excited. I'm like, I can cash a good game of the year ticket early, and that I thought was really being mispriced. And I looked at the schedule. I thought, Tennessee's got Georgia State, and they only have Chattanooga on deck, so they'll focus on that BYU game. And I was thinking on the BYU side, just like I said, BYU's got this road trip to Knoxville in between hosting their arch rival Utah and having home games against SC and Washington. So I thought I had a good handicap there, and I thought I had a really good line. Now, I never think anything's a sure thing in this industry, but I thought that was a good one, but we'll see what happens now.
I guess I'll go off script here real quick. I got 6 more games I sent over to you. I'll save those for the pick 6, but I do want to get your thoughts on LSU and Texas here, game 369-370, because we don't have, I think this is the only signature game we really have now with where the Stanford and USC programs are as far as week 2 goes. So, top 10 matchup in Austin, LSU up from 4.5 to 6.5. Pretty healthy number for Ed Orgeron's bunch on the road.
Yeah, my number's 4.5, and it's surprising to me because I thought I'd have an LSU ticket in this game. I mean, week 1, overall season win totals, I was much higher on LSU than the marketplace in the summer. On the flip side, week 1, I bet Louisiana Tech. You look at the season win total, I bet under on Texas. I was much lower in the marketplace on Texas. So I thought, this will line up. I'll get LSU in a pick'em type of spot, or laying less than a field goal, and that's just not the case. So if anything, Adam, and this is stunning to me, I'd be on the Texas side at the current number. I mean, obviously, you got the whole Herman as the underdog. I'm not even going to repeat the stat. Everyone's heard it as far as he's really good against the spread in the underdog role, but just playing off of pure numbers, which I'm stunned, if anything, I'd lean with Texas here at plus 6.5.
Yeah, I think my number is in the 4 range, 4 and 4.5. So, yeah, I agree with you. I'm a little bit surprised to see this much LSU love. And I mean, look, Joe Burrow looked phenomenal last week against Georgia Southern. That was Georgia Southern. Now he's taking on Texas, obviously a much different kind of animal. I think the total is kind of intriguing here. See it go up from 55 to 56.5. That's a move I definitely do agree with. I'm not sure about the side, but I agree with the total going up here for sure.
Exactly. You got 2 really good quarterbacks here, 2 very efficient quarterbacks. I mean, of course, they'll probably go out and throw 4 interceptions apiece, but they don't make a lot of mistakes here. And with that up-tempo offense for LSU, and even they said that they left a few things on the cutting room floor when it came to last week's. They'll probably even show a few more wrinkles this week. Yeah, I agree with that. Over seems like and usually in an early marquee matchup like this, I would be looking to bet the under, and I think, generally speaking, some of the guys, that's why the number is a little higher here. Yeah, I think over is the way to go.
All right, so going to the pick 6 segment here, 6 games, rapid fire fashion. We start with game 343, 344, Arkansas State, UNLV. Tough loss, tough first weekend for Arkansas State. Obviously a lot going on with that program. I liked SMU in that spot. Of course, I didn't play it because I don't have any sack, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago on the show. But UNLV, a 1.5-point favorite here, Brad.
Yeah, I got a wrong team favorite here. I'd go with the Arkansas State side on this one. I just trust their program more. And that game really turned last week. If you dive into the box score, that SMU game, Arkansas State went up 23-16, and SMU had an immediate answer, a 98-yard kick return touchdown. So I thought that was huge in that game. Arkansas State wins this one, though.
You said wrong team favorite. I have Arkansas State -2. Is that about where you are?
Yep, that's exactly where I'm at.
All right, cool. Perfect. I love to compare my power ratings with yours because I know yours are very strong, and sometimes we have some big differences here on the segment. So I'm happy to hear that. Seems like I've got those 2 teams rated pretty well here so far. How about this one? Game 349, 350, San Diego State and UCLA. UCLA right through a touchdown now, as high as 8 out there in the marketplace at home against Rocky Long's bunch.
Yeah, even though I downgraded UCLA significantly, and I actually bet San Diego State last week. I thought their line was short against Weber State. That didn't work out for me, obviously. I think I bet it at -7, went up to like 11, and they win 6-0. So kudos, Rocky Long. You got that offense working. I think UCLA's offense will be a little bit better, although it's tough going against that San Diego State defense. My number is like 11.5, and that should scream you got to bet UCLA here. I'm not extremely confident with either team's power rating at this point. Even though my numbers are screaming at UCLA, I just lean with the Bruins here. I think there's a lot of unknown factors on both sides.
Yeah, I got this one 9.5. I'm happy to see it moving towards my line, but obviously at the current number, I don't have much interest in this one. How about we go down a couple spots here? Game 355, 356. I love this game. I think this is one of the most underrated games of the weekend. North Texas and SMU line down from 4 to 3, and even some 3 flat and 3 reduced juice out there on SMU.
A little surprising to me. I got this one closer to a touchdown, so I'm probably going to talk myself into betting SMU here, even though North Texas kind of boat raced them a little bit last year. But prior to that, SMU had won and covered 3 straight meetings. Shane Buechele looked the part, although he didn't throw a touchdown pass last week, even though he threw for 360 yards. North Texas, obviously you got a very experienced quarterback for them. I like Seth Luttrell, their head coach, but yeah, I don't know what you learn really from them after being an FCS foe last week. I think SMU, to me at least, is the more trustworthy team. And my number's closer to a touchdown. I'm on the ponies here.
That's interesting. I got this one 2.5. Usually they move towards your number and not mine. Yeah, usually they don't move toward my number when we have differences. So
yeah,
I guess we'll see.
Maybe I might be off a little bit here.
I don't know. I guess we'll see how this one plays out. There should be a good game. Like I said, I think one of the most interesting games of the weekend. How about this one here as we jump down the board? Game 359, 360, Central Florida and FAU. This one, a rocket's been strapped to this game, up from 9 to 10.5. Probably going to see 11 here as well, with the Knights a road favorite going to Boca.
Yeah, my number's 10.5, so it's a no play right here for me. Intriguing because, what is Florida Atlantic? The team we saw in the first 10 minutes last week against Ohio State down 28-0, and an FAU offense in their first 8 drives that had negative 34 yards of total offense. Or is it a team that actually looked halfway decent in the second half? Now you could argue Buckeyes took their foot off the gas pedal, but it'll be interesting. UCF looked the part last week, even though they weren't playing anybody. It's tough to, kind of a rivalry game, chip on their shoulder, Lane Kiffin. Even though my number's right at 10.5, if anything, at the current line, I'd lean Florida Atlantic.
My number's right at 10.5 too, but I think I grabbed, I can't even remember. Every day runs together much like it does for you. I think I grabbed FIU at the open at 9 at BetOnline, so at least I was able to get that, a little bit of line equity, but of course we'll see how this game plays out. I will spare you from talking about Coastal Carolina and Kansas. Head instead down to game 379, 380, Eastern Michigan and Kentucky. Kentucky laying 15, and they have Florida on deck.
That's a good point. And also, even my power rank say it should be like 16.5, and you also got some unique trends going in opposite directions here. Kentucky 1-10 against the spread as a home favorite, although I will say the one cover was last week against another MAC team in Toledo. Eastern Michigan, really good on the road, and in the underdog role. You look at the underdog role the last 3 years, Eastern Michigan's 18-3-2 against the spread, although I'll say Eastern Michigan last week, a little bit of a misleading final. They were outgained by nearly 100 yards against Coastal Carolina and were +3 in turnovers. I would like to lean on Eastern Michigan, but I got no bet here. That's just in-game for me.
Yeah, I don't have a bet here either. I'm worried about Kentucky with that big-time look-ahead spot against the Eastern Michigan team that is prone to playing close games. They don't win a lot of them, but they play a lot of close games. So we'll see if they can do the same thing here down in Lexington. One more game for the Pick Six. Cal and Washington, game 387, 388. Washington, 13.5, 14-point favorite, depending on where you look.
Well, I want to get your opinion on this one, but I'll give you mine because I think, I got ahead of this when I bet Washington. My number was like 16.5, 17. But after reading everybody else, it seems like I'm out on an island at this point on Washington. But here's what I saw. Washington, I think there's some mispricing going on. And the mispricing is this. Usually when a team loses their all-time leading passer in Jake Browning, their all-time leading rusher in school history in Myles Gaskin, usually they think, hey, downgrade. I could argue that Washington's actually upgraded at both positions with Jacob Eason. Chris Peterson's never had a 5-star arm talent like Jacob Eason at quarterback. And then Ahmed at running back, I think, has a higher ceiling than Myles Gaskin. The floor's, maybe a little bit lower, and he's not as consistent. But he's one of the better running backs in the Pac-12, even though no one's ever heard of him. Washington's got revenge from last year. They lost outright as a double-digit favorite. I'm not buying the Cal offense this year. I like the Huskies here.
Yeah, my number's also 17, and I caught this one on Sunday, 11.5 at BetOnline. I think minus $1.20 on that one. But, yeah, I got this one before the line went up. I agree with you. I'm in the 17 range. We'll see if you and I have to make adjustments to what happens here in this one. But I'm also on the Huskies here, albeit at a better price than what's out there in the market. So, Brad, if I can steal 5 more minutes of your time here just to talk a little bit of Week 1 NFL, and if I can't, just tell me, it's perfectly fine. Just curious what your Week 1 approach is with these numbers being out for so long.
Yeah, as always, man, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, Week 1 NFL is tough. I mean, number one, it's already the sharpest market in the world. And then you're telling me you got months of sharper players. The public's not betting until game week and specifically game day. But you've had 3-4 months of sharper bettors, professionals cleaning up any value that might be out there in the marketplace. I don't have significant bets other than what I bet early on somewhat. I thought some games were mispriced. Mainly for me, a lot of leans. I'm looking more dogs than favorites like I typically do in the NFL. There's some good trends out there in the marketplace, like the division dog trend you've seen the last 5 years. Division dogs in Week 1 are 17-4-1 against the spread. A lot of uncertainty, so what I like betting is the guys that I'm pretty confident I know what I'm going to see, like the guys you can trust, like a Mike Zimmer, who's covered 65% of his games in his overall career, and really even better than that as a home favorite. That's the type of stuff I'm looking for. But if you're asking me, hey, from a value aspect, just looking at the board, it's slim pickings at this point.
Now, I don't do NFL power ratings, but a lot of the sides I've been looking at here for the contests, both the Super Contest and the Circa Million, which I'll have during my first segment on Friday's show, a lot of the sides I like are moving towards the sides I like. So on one hand, that's great. It's kind of some reaffirmation. On the other hand, the Circa Million lines don't come out until today. So, I may lose some of the numbers that I did like. But if that happened to me in college football, I'd be thrilled. I'd be ecstatic. I'd be like, all these sides that I like, they're all moving my way. In the NFL, I don't get that same feeling. I mean, I don't necessarily know why. Maybe I'm worried about all the setups that happen early in the week and stuff like that, but that's something that kind of worries me almost a little bit in Week 1.
That's a good point. Well, on one hand, you want to be confident in the numbers that you have, but I think in the NFL where every half point matters, sometimes, I get ticked off when I, miss out on a half a point. In the end, because I know they mean so much, and if it moves towards my power rating, sometimes I like you, I feel like value's been lost there. Where college, where there's a lot more variance, especially early in the season, I actually prefer lines to move with me, even though that was the case in Week 1. And we got my clients and I got in front of like 4, 5, 6 point line moves on some games, and none of them worked out for us. But I don't think of it to every half point mattering. Obviously, every half point matters. I need to get out there, otherwise I'll take a lot of flack on Twitter. But certainly, every half point line move in the NFL is exponentially more important than what it is in college football.
Brad Powers, professional handicapper over at BradPowersSports.com. Brad, I'm not quite in mid-season form yet, so I do apologize for that. Want to be a little bit more compact with this segment. But in any event, what's going on over there at BradPowersSports.com?
Yeah, I just talk about the newsletter each week. I just keep it simple. The newsletter, what you'll get each and every week, and it's college, it's pro, it's game write-ups. I write up every single NFL game, every single college game, each and every week. You get my power ratings, my computer projected lines, trends of the week, misleading finals, key injuries. You get all of it. It's a weekly newsletter. You get it sent to you each and every Wednesday throughout the course of the season, and the price is just $79. Not for 1 week, not for 1 month, not for one sport, but the entire season, everything included through the Super Bowl, $79. It's called the Powers Picks newsletter. And how about this? Sample size of 650-plus games. 57% against the spread if you've been blindly betting on it the last 5 years. That's not too shabby. $79.
No, that's awesome. Brad Powers of BradPowersSports.com, at Brad Powers and the number 7 on Twitter. Brad, I love you, brother. Thanks for hanging out with me here again on this Thursday. I owe you an entire keg of beer next time I'm out in Vegas, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Talk to you, my friend. Take care.